Well, g'day and welcome back to the Voice of a Veteran podcast. And today is a pretty epic episode because I have the man himself, the Torpedo, Mr. Ian Thorpe, Australia's most successful Olympian, one of our most celebrated and successful and well-renowned sporting stars. And Ian, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show today.
Thank you.
So I've got Ian on the show and we've spoken beforehand because the Voice of a Veteran podcast is all about talking to those who might be struggling in their own transitions in life. You know, in particular, I've spoken with you about transitioning from high performance back to everyday life, and you have been at the very highest levels of performance in a very public way and have achieved amazing things from a very, very early age, and you're still at a very young age yourself at the moment and experience so much more than many others could dream to in their life. And particularly myself, looking at your story and speaking to you, there's so many parallels and takeaways that I know we can talk about today and that can really help not only our veteran audience, but anyone else going through this. So
Great.
I want to start in, how do you like to be known? How do you like people to reference to you?
Well, firstly, I prefer not being called Ian.
Oh.
I prefer Thorpe.
Thorpe.
Which is what most people go with. But yeah, I don't know how else to define myself. It's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
You know, it changes from time to time.
So if no one knew you on the street and introduced you to today, how would you introduce yourself?
If they didn't know my name, I'd actually probably go with my middle name.
Oh, really?
Which is James, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, my mum got to pick my sister's name, which is Christina. My dad got to pick mine, which is Ian.
Okay.
My mum must be a little bit more creative. Ian's kind of one of those names that you go, oh, so not great.
Gotcha.
That's why we've always gone with Thorpe.
There you go. Nice.
So, but if I introduced myself and no one knew who I was, I'd probably go with my middle name.
Okay. Good.
But yeah, it's you know, for me, you know, if I meet people, it's, you know, I introduce myself as Ian Thorpe.
Yep.
Depending on the situation as well.
But what do you like to be renowned for? You know, if someone was to take away a snapshot of who you are, what would you like that to be?
I don't think I necessarily want to be defined by my success.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's quite interesting if I'm somewhere else in the world or where people don't know what I do or what I've accomplished. You know, the conversation, if it starts out with, you know, what do you do? I kind of go, well, it's difficult to answer, but I used to be an athlete.
Yep.
And then they'll ask, oh, were you any good? I was like, yeah, I was quite good.
Just okay.
Yeah. And then, you know, they kind of go, well, what level? And then, you know, I explain. It's, for me, I enjoy it because there's some normality that's returned to my life at that stage as well.
Yeah.
It's usually, you know, I'll be in another country and it's usually when I put, you know, a card or, you know, a name to the face that people go, oh,
yeah.
That's swimmer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Oh, it's so fascinating. So fascinating. I can imagine you've definitely had all of your successes, as you say, in a very, very public way. Mm. So the ability to sort of blend back into some form of unrecognizable normality must be refreshing. In the context of like a lot of my peers, you know, in the special forces world and all that, no one has any idea like what they did and what we did. Mm. So it's very fascinating when they're like trying to talk to people and, you know, it's like, well, I used to be in the army, like, oh, okay, cool. Do you know this person? It's like, nah.
Not at all. Yeah. It's that random thing. But, you know, there's something to be said about that as well, is having accomplishments that people don't know about.
Yeah.
And knowing that you share them with a small group of people, a unique group of people. Yeah. And, you know, that's kind of the bond that you have together. You know, in a different way, some of my success people don't know about. They don't know what I do. And I think it's probably come from being in a position where most of what I accomplished was, you know, in the public eye.
Yeah, got you. And what is that like in particular? You know, you were saying that having that small connection with that small group, I'm not saying that's whether you find that true depth and people understanding that, but you come from a lifestyle that was so much overt affirmation, and in particular moving away from the spotlight so much within the sporting industry. Did you find yourself missing that, or did you find it to be a great relief during your movement away?
Well, I had kind of two transitions out of swimming. The first one, kind of, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, so I just wanted out of the sport. I wanted nothing to do with it. And
when was this?
This was in 2006.
2006, got it.
Probably when I was at the peak of my career.
Yep.
But I'd had enough. Swimming, it was not about training and performing anymore. It was doing press conferences and sponsorships and dealing with a public image and all of those things, which I didn't realize were going to be part of what I did in any way whatsoever. And I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't have, I guess the privacy that I really craved.
Yeah.
And so once I wasn't able to even train without kind of being followed.
Yeah.
I'd get papped at training. Once that was gone for me, I couldn't, because I'm a unique athlete in that I actually enjoy training more than competing.
Yeah, right.
So I actually like refining my skill or perfecting my skill and playing around with that so that it happens on race day.
Yeah, right.
So that was kind of the first time out, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at that stage. I just knew what I didn't want to do.
Okay.
And then the second time, I returned to swimming because I was missing something that I wanted to know why I loved what I did when I was a kid.
Yep.
And how that had been lost. So I wanted to get back a passion for what I did that made up so much of my life, and I regained that. I was able to get that back, that it was exploring the way that I move in the water.
Yep.
And then being able to apply speed to that, and the kind of G-forces that you go through in water are actually really quite high.
Yeah, right.
So at really fast swimming, there is kind of an adrenaline rush that you get with it.
Wow.
So for people who can't probably swim at that speed, it's like, put your hand up.
Yeah.
It's when you take off on a wave,
Yeah.
and you take that first stroke where the wave actually takes over, and you get that hit where you're going faster than you were before. But that's every stroke. So for your brain, the over kind of stimulus that you get from it is kind of why you want to be swimming at that speed.
Yep.
So getting back to, I guess...
That's fascinating. I'm being romanticized by swimming now. It's pretty cool, yeah.
So I guess getting back to the transition part of it, it's, the second time I was kind of advised and it was explained to me that we should kind of look at these things. If you commit your whole life, your whole kind of being to one area of kind of significance, and then it's taken away from you or it isn't there anymore, it's actually like going through a grieving period.
Absolutely.
And if you understand that and you can, kind of manage those different stages that you go through with grief, you can get through it and you can actually transition away from it a lot faster. The people who struggle are those that don't understand that, this major part of their lives does not exist anymore. Yeah. And they're trying to adjust to what they think they should be moving into, whilst there's all of these changes that are going on, even physically, what's happening with hormones and things like that, when you stop being elite at what you do.
Yeah, gotcha. It's fascinating. So you said in 2006 you left because you sort of lost that enjoyment for it. Did you lose your purpose, or there was just too much else clouding the space?
It wasn't that, no, I hadn't lost my purpose. I would have loved to continue swimming, but I just had a gutful.
Gotcha.
It was, for me, it was less about the training competition and what I thought swimming was when I was a kid, to it being more like a profession. And I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy, the spotlight that came. I guess before me, there wasn't really anyone that had this profile, and around the world as well.
Absolutely. And from a young age too.
And I was young. And so it's maturing in that world is difficult. But also, I kind of felt that there were other things that I wanted to do with my life.
Okay.
The other part to it, I won at the Sydney Olympics and I was 17. And so I kind of achieved my lifetime dream, which is different to a goal. A goal is something I think is quite practical that you work towards and you can accomplish. A dream's a kind of thing that you're a little bit embarrassed to say out loud because you don't know if you're supposed to, or you're allowed to dream that big in life. It's like saying, I want to be an astronaut kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So, I considered when I was 17, should I kind of move on? I've done everything that I ever imagined I could in swimming and more.
Yeah.
And
at a young age.
I was a kid.
What next? Yeah.
Well, it was, and I was considering, what else is there? And I had to. Do you know the reason I probably kept swimming was the only race I really considered that I lost in my career was a 200 freestyle at the Sydney Olympics.
Yep.
And it was probably the one thing that it was like, well, I didn't win that one. And I make sure I will now.
Yeah,
Not unfinished business. It was I'm a better swimmer than that.
Okay.
I've trained harder. I've trained faster. I should have won that race. And I was against, the best, arguably the best sprinter in the world. One of my friends, Peter Van den Hoogenbom. Yeah. Hard name to say. But it got me back, and I went back to training where I had a philosophy that, on my very worst day, I'd be better than any of my competitors on their very best day.
Okay.
And that was how I trained, and that was how I approached competition from then on. And all of my competitors certainly knew it. I didn't tell them. Yep. They worked it out.
Gotcha.
And, there were teams, kind of spying on me to see what training sessions I was doing. Yeah. One of my competitors said, well, if he's prepared to do that for this race, I'm going to concentrate on a different one. Yeah.
Wow, get it. Where did this mindset, where did this purpose and determination come from? It's been so fascinating to listen to you that it was really so focused on mastering your skill set.
I think that's the right way. It was not about winning. It was about being the best that I could be with what I had.
Okay.
I am not. Swimmers don't usually look like me. I've got a different body shape to what most swimmers do. Swimmers are lean, they're tall, they're kind of lanky, broad shoulders, narrow hips. I've got the broad shoulders, narrow hips, but I've got bulk and probably a softer muscle tone to a lot of the other swimmers as well. Yep. So they were kind of, when I was swimming, they were like, oh, this is the perfect body shape. And then, kind of after it was like, oh, we found a new one. It's this one. And basically, I haven't seen anyone, there's very few swimmers that, looked like me. Yeah. But I wanted to work with what I had to be able to see what I could deliver, what could come from this. That's why I said I'm an athlete that loves training.
Yeah, wow.
Because that's where I would refine my skill set.
Yeah. So it's so fascinating to hear that. A lot of people look at your career and see all the accomplishments and, think it's just, an ongoing level of success. But for you, success was measured by your own individual performance and how you felt achieving those things. They were just sort of on the side. So
the difference is people will see the gold medals.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see the time.
Yeah, good. Okay.
So, and if the time's slower than what I've been doing and what I've actually prepared for, part of me is disappointed, even though I won the race.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of, I think you have to have that kind of desire that you don't have limitations, or that gold medal is not the limitation for you. Good. If it could be better, if it could be faster.
And it always can be, yeah?
Well, it can be. Yeah. You're always striving for it, and rarely does it happen. And then, there was a swim that I did where, I've always I've tried for the best swim rather than the best result. And there was a swim that I did that I broke the world record in this race. It was a 400 freestyle at the Commonwealth Games in Manchester. And it kills me to this day that I could have swum faster in it.
Oh, wow.
And I was being lazy.
Wow.
I was thinking I have a big program ahead of me. I have, multiple races per evening. This is a week-long competition. Things like that that were in my head when I shouldn't have had a problem going faster in that race.
Gotcha.
And it's more that I didn't realize I was going as fast as what I was.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I guess you don't know when you're in there swimming just how it feels. The pursuit of excellence, it's a quality that is hard to find these days, and it's so fascinating hearing that you don't settle for simply medallic results, but pursuing yourself and pushing yourself forward. How does that go when you then depart from your ability to, or when you did transition from professional swimming, were you still doing it on the side? How were you still fulfilling that desire and that need for yourself to keep pushing yourself further and harder?
No, I couldn't. The first time, in 2006 again, I didn't want to go near a pool.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I hadn't been in a pool until, for basically 4 or 5 years. I'd swum, I think, less than a handful of times, actually in a pool.
Jeez, that's a huge
break. That was
break.
it. So nothing. Wanted nothing to do with the sport.
Left with a bad taste?
I was, and also kind of when I finished, almost as soon as I finished, I was accused, or it was leaked that I had an irregular test where I had an increased level of testosterone and also estrogen at the same time, which is very irregular,
isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, it was a negative test, but it was leaked to the press. So this was me kind of just going, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be around anyone like this. I'm out of the swimming world.
Got it. Okay.
When it came to the next part, I wanted to keep swimming. I kind of started a preparation too late to go to the Olympics.
So when did you rejoin?
I rejoined 2011. And that was when I was starting to prepare for 2012. Yeah, got it. And it takes a long time to make it up.
I can imagine.
And then in early 2013, I was training, and I just really wanted to go to another Olympics. Yeah. I was training, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get there, but I was doing weights, and I broke my back. And I was in a foreign country.
Where was this?
I was in Switzerland. Okay. So I smashed 2 vertebrae.
What were you doing?
It was on a bench, and it was doing a rotational movement where your elbow drops to the ground and you do an extension, but you're twisting across. So it's that rotation, and I guess the amount of muscle I must have had at the time, and then just hitting the perfect angle, meant that I cracked 2 vertebrae.
Wow, that's impressive.
And because I didn't know the number for to actually get the ambulance, I had to drive myself to hospital.
Oh wow.
Which was kind of, I'm not crying, by the way.
No, we're out here on the deck, and it is a scorching day here in Sydney, and we've both decided to wear dark colours. So thank you for braving it for me.
Yeah.
So what about? That's incredible. So even for me, trying to draw parallels here back to the majority of our veteran audience, in 2006 you went through your own transition, which a lot of guys you can imagine do, where they're sort of done with it, they want to get out, they want to do their own thing. Then you've come back in, and then you've gone through what is the most acute, which is that sort of sudden departure, the medical transition.
It kind of forced my hand. It was like, I'm not sure, and then it's like, and it's realizing how finite your career is in sport, and you probably know this as well, this can change, an injury or something else that probably for a veteran can be even more significant, or usually it is, and how it just changes. But in all of that, in kind of rejoining the community, there's a camaraderie that we have that exists that I really enjoy, and I get a lot out of that I may not see people for years, and when I see them, completely comfortable around them,
absolutely,
ready to have a chat, ready to catch up, what's going on, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So it's, and I have that with friends all around the world now. It's cool.
Remember we talked about, when you left in 2006, were you very happy with who you were from that period, 2006 to 2011, or where did you sort of start to feel that you were losing that identity and lose that purpose?
No, in 2006 I really struggled. It really was. And it was, you know, for me, I was ready to move on. But I went through a kind of major depression during that period.
Yep.
Which
you wanted to leave though?
Yeah, I did.
And then?
Yeah, in the following kind of looking at when it was, that's kind of what I went through.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
And I don't think it was because of training. It was a combination of a number of different factors.
Yeah.
But yeah, it meant that transition was even more difficult. Gotcha. Trying to work out what you want to do when you're struggling to even get out of bed.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
That kind of, it doesn't work all that well.
And what do you feel led to that? So, you know, me, myself and many other veterans go through exactly that. You know, I left of my own fruition, but then I started to sort of distance myself from my community. Like I was probably saying to you beforehand, no one really knew who I was or what I did. So I was even a bit uncertain with my own identity and trying to reconnect with people, and then trying to find that new purpose, that new spark that makes you want to get up out of bed and, you know, pull G-forces in the pool, and you're not doing that anymore. So what did you go through?
Well, the hard thing is the expectation is that if you're able to do X, Y, and Z extremely well, you should be able to move on to being able to do something in normal life pretty easily.
Yeah, right.
And so your expectations of yourself are also higher. So it makes that more challenging.
Absolutely.
And I think most people that have achieved something at an elite level understand and appreciate that.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you also want to be able to accomplish something at the same level.
Yep.
That's what you're used to. Otherwise, you don't want to do it at all.
Yes.
So you either avoid it or you avoid things so that you don't have to go through this, or you go the other way where you do find something that you're passionate about, that you want to be able to succeed in, and you fully commit yourself to it.
Yeah, absolutely. A key thing that I say when people ask me about my struggles in my career, I remember there's a period in 2012 overseas with my guys in Afghanistan, and the biggest issue for me is I know I'm never going to be that cool again. I was at the top of my performance. It was just, you know, you talk about the mastery of your skill set. That was the mastery of my skill set as a commander, as on-the-ground tactics, everything. And now, as you say, I've sort of transitioned from that. And you know, some of my biggest tasks of the day, I take my dog for a walk. And it's very hard to find that motivation to tap back into that former self.
To find normality and happiness within it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I had a thing, I was talking to some kids at a swimming thing, and one of the kids said, "Why are you so cool?" I was like, "I am not cool." And I was like, I'm like, because then I said, because I asked, "Can you repeat the question?" Because I thought maybe they'd said cute.
Oh, yeah.
And then when
and you're like,
cool,
"Yes, I am."
And then I was like, "Cool." I was like, "No, I'm not cool." And it was kind of one of those things that was like, okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of being a young person and thinking someone else has it all together. That they can manage this. Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of people that have obviously looked after you. Mate, I remember 2000, I was sitting there, you know, watching your bloody 400. You picked the bloody nice long race, watching the torpedo swimming in the 400 and just belt it home. And then watching the relay. I have never yelled at a TV harder than watching you bring it home for the relay. And you were 17 at that time?
17.
Like, that's incredible. You know, and that is etched. And it was the Sydney 2000 Olympics. It's etched in everyone's minds. And then, as you said, 2006, you then transitioned completely away from swimming. You got to understand, from me sitting here, it's so fascinating to hear and want to like dive into like what you went through emotionally and mentally. You know, we've all been talking about this. Mental health is such a hot topic at the moment, and it needs to be. You know, you performed at the highest levels of physical fitness. Your mental edge, as we've just dived into, is so prepared and so focused on your own performance. But then moving away from having that in the context of what you were doing, you know, what did you go through?
Look, it's kind of it's interesting because I had the 400 freestyle first night of competition at the Olympics, and then the 4x1 was, you know, I think about 45 minutes after it. So I had to do both races, and you use different energy systems to be able to race them. And I had a coach say to me, I won't name them, should, but I won't. It said, "Look, if you can conserve some energy during your 400, perhaps you should."
Oh.
And it's like, it is the worst thing to say to an athlete because you're
especially what you've just said about how you operate as well.
Yeah. In my mind, that was someone saying to me, well, I responded kind of with, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be doing both?
Yeah, right.
But it's kind of when you have those seeds of doubt that are planted, they may not actually grow or germinate at that particular time, but they are still planted there.
Yeah, right.
And later on, when it becomes more of a career and things like that, you start to question, well, and like I was saying before about that race where I broke the world record and I wish I swam faster because I wasn't trying hard enough.
Yeah.
I was looking at a whole competition rather than that individual race that was there, then and there, that I could have performed better in.
Okay.
When it came to the 4x100, that was it was an incredible moment. It was history making. An American team had never been beaten in this race in Olympic history.
Yep.
And thanks for putting the 17-year-old kid at the end.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it could have gone the other way. So let's just be grateful that it went the way that it did.
We watched the Thorpe kick.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was amazing because you were behind on the last lap too.
I was. But look, I knew I was going to be behind. So theatrically, it's great. But I was up against the fastest American swimmer.
Yeah.
And look, I knew it was. I've never heard a cheer so loud than what I did before, during that race.
Yeah.
But that cheer became a collective sigh at about the halfway mark because I was behind by quite a bit. And it was like, oh, this is kind of not playing out how it's supposed to for the fans or for people watching this. Yeah. But I was always going to come home faster than Gary Hall Jr.
It would have been nice if you told us that beforehand, mate.
Well, everyone should have known it. Every commentator knew it. It was like I went out. I dove in. I had 0.3 of a second head start, and the guys had asked me. The rest of the guys in the relay had asked me, "What do you want? What can we do to help you out?" I said, "I want to lead." And I've now learned that when you ask for something, you've got to be more specific. Like when I said a lead, I was expecting like a second, not like 0.3 of a second.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was given a little bit of a lead, and that was pretty much the end of me being in front in the first part of that race.
Yeah, gotcha.
But gradually, as I kind of, was coming home in that second 50, I could tell I was taking up ground or taking up water, lane, whatever you call it in swimming, and was gating and knew how tight it was going to come at the very finish. And, I just kind of reminded myself once of what I'd done in training, and also that he's going to be hurting more than me. And that's what I went with, and went to the technical element, which is what I had control over. I have control over anything that he was going to do. I had control over my stroke, and that was about it. And so as you go and as you're fatiguing, your stroke actually will shorten. So I was just trying to lengthen my stroke the whole way into that finish.
This is a very superior mindset for a then 17-year-old. And I just love that key nugget that you just drew. There's so much uncertainty that you can't control, but you focused on what you could control. And I want to, again, and I'm going to keep jumping forward to when you were then departing from swimming, how potentially some of this mindset benefited you, or how even in rebuilding yourself from those low points you've spoken about, you've been able to default back to what we say, defaulting back to the level of your training and the level of your mindset.
I have to know when I turn it on and turn it off.
Yeah.
And so I can apply the skill, but I can't do it with everything. So I've had to learn there's certain things that I'm not going to win at, and that's okay-ish. If I really cared about them, I'd probably commit to them a bit more.
Yeah, gotcha.
And it's just whether or not you care for those things.
Got it.
And for me, it's looking at what I do and what I value in what values I have in myself, and setting myself up for when I am engaged with those things that I will perform at the same level as what I did when I was swimming. I prepare for things. People will tell me I look like a natural at doing something, but there's a lot of rehearsal that went in for me to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
To know what I'm doing. And for me, practice is key. And it gives me a confidence when I go into things that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise, because I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of kind of corporate kind of engagements around that. And, I'm actually quite a shy person. So it's not natural for me to stand up in front of, hundreds of people, or for me to have been competing in front of thousands of people. That's kind of not me.
Yeah.
But I realize that that's part of what I do. So I've got to learn how to be able to manage it.
Got it. People you have around you, those who you spoke previously about having those seeds of doubt planted, to be able to maintain your level of performance physically, mentally and emotionally, I'm sure you must have had a pretty great team around you, particularly during your competing, but also I'm intrigued to hear about in your own life and then even moving away from swimming, changes in that support network and how that might have impacted you and yourself.
Sure. So yeah, I guess there's part of sport where you have to be prepared to be a so-called selfish person, where you are using a swimming coach. I had a coach, then a junior coach as well. I had a physio, an osteo, I had a massage therapist, I had a nutritionist. I had a sports doctor. There's then a biomechanist. The list goes on and on and on of people who are contributing to my performance. And you have to get the best out of each of those.
Proactively, they're seeking you out.
Getting and there's a willingness for all of those people that they want to do this. They love this, what they're doing. Yeah. And so you shouldn't feel guilty for accessing their services, but you have to get the most out of them to be able to get the most out of yourself.
Good.
So there's an analogy. Well, it's in Japan. There's a fruit called a muskmelon, and it looks like a cantaloupe or a rock melon, whatever you want to call it. But on the inside, it's green. Okay. And what they'll do is they'll look at the vine of this particular fruit, and they'll look for where there's the perfect T shape, so that symbolically all of the nutrient will go into this melon. So whichever part of it has the perfect T shape, all of the nutrient will go in there, and they cut off every other melon so that it all goes in there. Wow. So this is what you give someone when they go to hospital. This is, or you can have it for dessert. It's like a couple of $100. Oh wow! For one melon.
That'd be a good melon.
It is really good.
Okay.
But it's kind of the same thing with sport. Yep. And in all of those sacrifices that you make to be able to create the perfect product there.
Yeah. Wow, this is so fascinating. One, I'm going to be finding me a muskmelon. But what you said there in particular was having that proactive team around you, then moving away from that, when talking about your injury in 2011 and beyond, and once you move away from, I'm assuming you still don't have those resources readily seeking you out. Are you available, or the requirement for you to reach out and then ask for help is a key piece I want to talk about? Sure.
If you're an athlete, you actually have the best access to the best doctors, because all of us end up injured basically at the end of our careers. So we have a great, if you ever need advice of which surgeon to see, usually athletes are the best people to see. Because we've all had them. I saw a friend recently, and their girlfriend said, you're not Olympians anymore, you're Olympians, because all you do is talk about all of your injuries that you have kind of post-sporting career, which is kind of true. But I guess that support network, it's what you make of it. And I look at kind of my friendship circles and things like that, and I was given the analogy that you've got to think of it as kind of being a bit like a train, that some people will get on at different times in your life, and it's important they're on the train, and they may get off at a station before you get off. But they can always get back on the train and things like that. So you get support, and you get the people that you need or what you need at different times, and then realize that you may be jumping on someone else's train as well. Yeah. Wow. So I want to just jump into a couple of parallels to help the sort of veteran audience listening here. So, particularly from my career in the special forces out there at Holsworthy, we have like a high performance cell. We have everything from altitude chambers. I think I've been there, by the way. I think you have too. We actually do a lot of work we did a lot of work with AIS and a lot of other, probably people like yourself coming out and having a look at it. Because, we had things from trying to rehabilitate guys who'd had
blast injuries, gunshot wounds, through to just, you can imagine, half the guys I have out there is just elite athletes themselves. And you have everything on demand. You know, if you have a sniffle, if you have a joint issue, there's doctors and stuff everywhere. And then I went from that to then my transition from defence, whereby, I snapped my patella tendon years ago, and it took 12 months to get recognised. And then the doctors along the way were all focused on compensation, liability. And, I didn't know, I joined the army at 17. I didn't know how to find a good doctor. I've since been to some great sports doctors, but you went from this environment whereby everything was provided for you proactively, and I then had to reactively reach out, and I didn't know what to do. And I was also too proud to say that I didn't know what to do. And at this time, I distanced myself from my community because their train keeps moving once you jump off. Yep. They're training for the next event, they're training for the next mission, whatever it is. And you just start getting lower and lower into this hole of frustration where you're struggling at the smallest things, where you previously had super high standards and everything else that you do. And it's just such a fascinating situation. And I want to dive into a lot more about how potentially you, because I know I've spoken, you've gone through similarly yourself, but then also that support network. And you've even spoken about reconnecting with the guys from the 2000 Olympics and like having your own WhatsApp group and finding ways to connect and communicate and have these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that it only took 20 years to put together. And it was kind of...
better late than never.
It was like, it's 20 years since the Sydney Olympics. Why wasn't this group started earlier? And you
can find some parallels there.
It kind of it was funny. It started as congratulations, what's everyone up to then going through jokes and stupid memes, and then occasionally there's something that's serious that comes back up.
That's it.
Recently, one of the swimmers that we knew didn't go to the Sydney Olympics, but was just before that. Who actually, it's kind of allegedly he's up for bringing in a serious quantity of drugs.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
got it.
So that was brought up, and different people feel different ways about it.
Yeah, got it.
And so it's kind of even chats like that we wouldn't be able to have otherwise.
I could imagine.
Yeah,
just that Aussie larrikinism. But just that and how you find that like reconnecting with your old guys at a personal level?
Well, I always see them.
Yeah.
I see them at different things, and I'm happy to see them.
Yeah.
We don't see each other enough. We were talking about the relay before. So we have a rule with the relay boys. If there's three of us together, we always send a picture to the one person who's missing.
Yeah.
So we and then because we were going to do something around the 20th anniversary of it, but we couldn't do it because of COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
So I had the NRL make out a cutout of Ash Callis. The ones that were in the stands, to make it look like there's a crowd.
Yeah.
So we'll take him around to events and things and sending him pictures.
Good.
To try and make him feel included in it as well.
I love that. I mean, for myself and many other veterans, again, that connection is really hard to find. And that's why we have days like, Anzac Day where we get together, and otherwise it's at weddings and funerals, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's not as many big speaking events and whatnot we all go to, but you were saying before how you're just able to pick up those conversations and jump straight back into it, and sort of lower any of those defenses or layers of pride that you might have, and be able to reconnect. And I actually often find those, I call them my mental fitness sessions. I get more out of those connections and conversations than I do with my weekly psychologist or psychiatrist discussions.
I think because you've had a shared experience,
that's it.
You instantly can relate, and you don't actually have to explain, what that is. It's just known, and it's, often it's unspoken. And then if you need to open it up a little bit more, the starting point, you're so much further down the path to be able to go there.
Yeah.
Whereas for, I guess, someone and, looking at psychologists and things like that, they have to have an understanding of you as an individual without completely understanding the experience. And how long is it actually going to take for you to explain yourself to someone else, even if they're a specialist in their field?
Yeah.
It's going to take you a long period of time for them to get an inkling of what is required for you as an individual, and how to show you how to look after yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, at the moment with 2020 lockdown, COVID's everything. I mean, already the Australian medical system is so booked out in the veteran space. It's like 3 months wait for a psychologist. But I keep trying to tell people that, look, just go out and connect with each other and have these conversations.
Yeah, so I'm patron, I'm a board member for a mental health organisation, which is Reach Out. So we work with young people and their parents usually. So we know from all of the data that we have in what we do, young people between the ages of 14 and 25, the first people they'll speak to about any mental health kind of concern or problem or what they're going through is family and friends.
Yep.
And then the next place that they go is the internet. So there's good information, bad information out there. So we provide an area where it's peer reviewed and accessible for people that it's appropriate for the age groups that we work with. And we also know that within that age group, the leading cause of death is suicide.
Yep.
And we also know that of that particular group, 70% of those young people will actually not seek out any professional or clinical help.
Yes.
So it's where do you turn to then? Yep. And it's a similar kind of thing.
Yep.
Some people would say it's a stigma. Other people may not feel comfortable speaking to someone that they don't know.
Yep.
So you do rely on those that are closest to you.
Yeah, absolutely same in the veteran community. Some statistics for you that were really still shocking for me is that during their time serving within the military, the veteran suicide rate is 50% below the community average. And then after they've transitioned from defence, the average, particularly for those male and women under the age of 35, is 30% higher than the community average. So that's why there's so much going on in this space and these conversations about that transition period from defence, because somehow something along the way is going from 50% below to 30% above. That's the really shocking figure at the moment.
Yeah, we have, and that is a frightening figure. In sport, we know that there are more people that require a medical health intervention than what there is in the general population.
Yeah.
And
is that after sport or within sport?
Even during.
Wow, so that's fascinating.
Yeah. And we're kind of wondering, like the big question is that we're trying to work out is it that there's something in sport that attracts people to it? Is it the endorphins that you experience that kind of help mask, what's an ongoing mental health issue? Or is it because of the sport and the pressure that comes from it, the repetition of it being isolated at times?
Yeah.
Is that what's causing it?
You're right.
So that's the next part we have to work out.
Well, I think that is, so in particularly for me, trying to put the finger on my own experiences with mental health and changes therein, within the Defence Force, within the military, within my Special Forces group, you're always surrounded by people. We always had a team. We were never really, had to maintain ourselves to an individual standard, but we're always within a collective team. And that culture that we had as a team was really that protection, that barrier and everything that kept us safe. And then it's when you leave that, and for the first time, some of us are actually on our own, leaving that culture, leaving that support network is really what I have found, and so many thousands now of veterans I've spoken to feel the same. But that's fascinating. Like you were saying, you really are, you have a support team around you, but that team is supporting you for a purpose, which for a performance piece. But how about actually like supporting you emotionally and what Ian Thorpe today needs, as opposed to the guy who's going to be leaving this industry?
Sure. And look, we know when we look at it broader, that, people will often say, why didn't you just say something?
It's not that
kind
easy.
of the response that you get from people. You should have told me. I would have helped out, more than willing, happy to do it, kind of thing. But you just don't feel like doing that. It's the hardest thing, is to pick up the phone in times that you're struggling. It's kind of, it's working out, how do you get to that point where you can speak to people at this level, and not feel judged, as well.
Absolutely.
I kind of, in working in mental health now, my goal in this area is that we don't call it mental health anymore. It's just health.
Absolutely. That's what I tell people. We go to the gym and work out. We call it fitness. Do we call it physical health? That's all encompassing. This mental health piece, it's just, people have a trainer, people go to the gym. Fitness is fitness. It's physical, mental, and emotional. Mm-hmm. And I'm intrigued to understand, particularly in yourself, you spoke about earlier about, going through depression, and how and what you found personally sort of helped you? Were you able to reach out and ask for help, or what was the sort of journey back to obviously where you're at the moment?
It's an ongoing journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like instantly I'm cured.
Or just like a physical injury, yeah?
Yeah, like I never used to believe the doctor when they would tell me that, you know, this is manageable. That you can manage it, because I didn't feel
talking about your mental.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, that you can actually manage this, and you know, over time, you know, you'll get better and you'll feel, you know, a similar way to how you have before. And I was just like, I think this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I've tried different kind of strategies, which is kind of the fake it till you make it thing, where you force yourself to go out and do things that normally give you joy, even though you don't experience any joy doing it.
Yep.
Connecting with your friends, doing activities that you've enjoyed in the past. And, you know, I've done that and then kind of gone, I kind of still don't feel any better.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I went through a stage where I only thought I would ever get back to being kind of content. That I could never aspire to be happy in what I was doing.
Wow.
That I should settle for contentment.
Okay.
And that was what I was willing to go for. And then I realized...
That would have been a huge shift for someone like you who's used to the pursuit of excellence.
Yeah. But then there was a time where I had some clarity, and I actually realized, no, I'm actually pretty happy at the moment.
Yeah.
And once I had that, I realized I've got something to work with here.
Yeah.
You know, having that light at the end of the tunnel, like trying all of the things that I was supposed to do to get there. It took me a long time, but it was also understanding myself.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kind of show some respect for what I'm going through. In that, you know, sometimes I'll go, do you know what, I'm actually just going to take a day off.
Yeah.
But first thing tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to get up and I'm going to walk the dog. It's the first thing. So I'll give it that kind of level of respect, but it's not spend a week at home, do nothing, watch Netflix. I won't allow myself to do that. Yeah. But once I kind of started to see that, yeah, I can be happy, yeah, I can get fulfillment and enjoyment out of my life, it did change my mindset that, you know, I am someone that has depression. Yes. But I don't think I have a depressed person's mindset now.
Love it. There are so many golden nuggets I want to jump in and grab out of there. And the first one is that focusing on being happy as opposed to achieving something. You know, a lot of people, myself included, go from, you know, achieving accomplishments and their sort of tangible dividends, but then there's not those accomplishments or those goals to achieve or even dreams to achieve. And for me, it's actually finding that the dream was actually just to be happy doing whatever you're doing. And that's health.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks. Because it's like, and you're right. Yeah. But it's like me going to the gym. I mean, I have the best excuse not to go. I mean, I've done this most of my life. And so I need to have a trainer to go to the gym. Yeah. So I feel like I'm letting someone down. Yeah. And then I go, and then it's like, what are you training for?
I'm so with you.
And they're like, well, I'm like, I'm training for life. And I kind of roll my eyes or whatever it is, right? And it's kind of like, yeah, not so into this. I prefer having goals and kind of reaching them. It's actually really hard to go, I value my health in a way, the same as what I value my performance.
That's it. I'm the same. I used to train for a purpose, and even outside of defense, there might have been a superficial purpose, like summer's coming up or whatever. But then again, exactly like yourself, you used to train for a purpose. You know, you trained at the higher level. You were training for a physical task. I had to be as fit as I could in order to do my job as best as I could. But when there's no longer that extreme motivation, it's so hard to just, you know, I don't actually need to do this. Like I have to want to do it. I don't need to do it. And that transition in mindset is so difficult for some people to grasp. But a lot of guys, when they get out of the military, really fall off the fitness wagon. Yeah,
it's one way or the other. People either usually stay fit or they become slobs.
Yeah.
And I kind of worked out I didn't want to be a slob, but I also realized I cannot justify doing 30 to 40 hours of training just to actually be in the physical shape that I used to be in. Yeah. And I don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of somewhere in between.
And even you saying like needing a trainer, you know, always used to pride myself physically, and until recently I've actually gone like, yep, I need a trainer, I need a program, because my motivation just isn't there.
Even if you don't have a trainer, have a friend. Where you feel like you're letting someone down by not going. That's, if you don't have a trainer, you can't afford it. Have a mate, and you'll turn up to the gym a lot more than if you just do it by yourself.
Love it. The battle buddy needed.
Yeah.
And then loving yourself, learning to actually respect and look after yourself and not always put yourself down. That was another key point you brought out. It's so hard we keep holding ourselves to our own high standards, but then actually learning to love yourself first and foremost. It sounds so cliche, but you've said exactly that when you were just speaking before.
Yeah, I guess I think we're probably harshest on ourselves. If you probably looked at yourself and you looked at what you've accomplished and what you do objectively, you couldn't see that it was you. You'd probably score yourself a lot higher than what you would if you're looking in the mirror, doing the same thing.
And we're always benchmarking ourselves against what we were as opposed to what we are.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is correct that, and it's the same for everyone. Around the world, it doesn't matter what you do, what field of play that you're in. It's realizing that as you kind of mature, there will be another generation of people that follow you that hopefully you've inspired that can actually be better than you, and to be happy for them.
Yep.
In the same way that I was inspired by a generation of people that came before me.
Yeah.
And so it's I think that's kind of the test of being a true champion, is being able to do that, and whilst you're performing at your best, to behave and perform in a manner that is inspirational for another generation of people.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating hearing that. You speak about a lot. You work a lot in the mental health space, working with youth. I want to talk in particular that I find a lot of value has been returned to the things I do by being able to sort of give back to my community, be that in some form of a mentoring role or just finding some way to be and feel selfless. And when I spoke to you previously about within swimming, that importance of sort of mentoring that next generation and even those transitioning from sport and your experiences and sort of passion therein.
Yeah, like for me, I mentor. Everyone asks me, "Would you coach?" And I can and I could do it from time to time, but it's not really something that I want to do, and I actually don't think people would get as much out of it as me coming into a session and actually having fresh eyes on it and saying, "How about you try this out?"
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like being an uncle. It's kind of all of the fun, but none of the responsibility.
100%.
So I like that part of that as well. Because if you were to coach a squad, you go on a roller coaster ride with them.
Yeah.
And I've had enough of that for now.
Yeah, I got you. When you did depart from sport on both occasions, were you sort of mentored throughout that period, or was primarily all in your life been swimming focused, actual performance focused?
No, I think in sport we've spoken, or people have talked a really good game about what they do for athletes, in terms of during their careers and post careers, and what they'll do in transition for them. And, it's not true. Yeah. Only now there's something else that I chair, which is the athletes' health and wellbeing for the AIS. So all sports in Australia, it's funded by the Sports Commission, but for the first time, we'll actually withhold funding if sports aren't matching or meeting the criteria required for athletes' well-being during their careers and what they're doing for them post-careers.
Wow.
So it's making sure that athletes are actually preparing for a life outside of their sport.
And how are they doing that?
Well, if they don't meet the criteria, they don't get the money.
Yeah.
So it's... But
what sort of like preparations are you putting athletes through to prepare for life after sport?
Well, it would be looking at, that it's unacceptable not to have a job or to be studying whilst you're involved in your sport.
Uh-huh.
It will actually create a better rounded or more rounded athlete that we are hoping will stay in the sport longer because they know that they've got some security after it. It means that they won't be putting all of their eggs in one basket around sport, which can finish at any moment in time. It's a finite career that, one injury or one health problem can ruin your career like that. And it's over in an instant. And if you're not prepared, there's no job security in what you're doing.
That's so fascinating.
So then we're also looking at how do we link up, people with different organizations that are, involved in sport or, have some interest in actually applying the skills that an athlete may have into their organizations, because they've seen them do the hard work and they think that they'll be great performers in the workforce as well.
That's brilliant. What's this organisation called again? Sorry.
So it's from the AIS, but the Athlete Health and Wellbeing. Athlete Health
and Wellbeing. It's funny, we work so closely with AIS, from developing our selection courses, our fitness training, everything else in between. But it sounds like there's already an off-the-shelf sort of organisation this new Defence Joint Transitional Authority can link into to get some.
Well, they probably can. The things are that it's not too dissimilar to some of the things that we talk about or we've spoken about, that why recreate it if there's something there. I mean, I know that some of the swimmers, for example, have already worked with special forces and learning different techniques and what we can share.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the opinion was that sport is in the national interest, so we may as well train our athletes to know everything the same way. And
wow,
I was like, okay,
I like that. Sure.
Okay, we can go with that.
Got enough on your plate?
It must have been a prime minister that happened to like sport.
Oh yeah.
Which is the other problem that we face. At different times, different prime ministers don't like sport as much.
The political presence. That's the one thing I loved about the military, is it was very apolitical. We just went out and conducted tasks, and our life after military is all political. So it's been fascinating. One other key thing you brought out was you mentioned a dog.
Yeah.
Now I have this. We both have dogs. My one's running around here somewhere, and I never had a dog throughout my career. I was just so unstable and unable to be responsible for it. But the number one thing I go back and say, particularly any single guys or girls getting out of the military, is get yourself a bloody dog. As far as a proactive companion, antidepressant, there's nothing quite like it.
No, it's true. Dogs, there's actually research on it. So it was, I was giving out kind of top tips for dealing with mental health issues. And one of mine was, can I say get a dog? And they're like, yeah, you can, because there's evidence behind it as well. But it is true. And having, pets, especially dogs, they have an intuition around how you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they know what to do.
Yeah.
They know when to give you space. They know when to actually curl up right next to you.
Yeah.
And also, for me, I take my dog for a walk, and it is actually for my own mental health. It is not about exercise in any way. It is just to be out there and also being present.
Yeah.
So I don't listen to music and things when I'm doing that.
Okay.
So I try and be mindful while I'm there, like try and see if I notice something new today that I haven't seen before.
Good. In the moment.
It's kind of, COVID's actually it pushed me that way.
Yeah.
Where, I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing at the moment. I don't know what work's coming up. And, I knew that it would be very easy for me to sit at home and watch too much Netflix and just be lazy.
Yeah.
And so having a dog, making myself take her out for a walk, and then I was like, I didn't know there was a view of the water from here.
That's it.
And things like that, I just picked up on that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
Because dogs are so in the moment. They are not thinking about, tomorrow I need to do this. They're thinking about what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I love this. Dad's here. It's brilliant. And that's why I said my antidepressant, but it's also my anti-anxiety. You said, if we
can pat a dog. If you want your blood pressure to go down, pat a dog.
Yeah, absolutely. If you take your headphones out, if you turn your phone off and you just look at your dog or do something with your dog, it is all about that moment right there.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Now, in one part for me that I want to chat about is throughout my career, I'm an openly gay man now, but throughout my career, I ended up with 16 years in the military, and it was very unique whereby, with the benefit of hindsight, I was the only person suppressing my own sexuality. I was in an organisation that was, very alpha male dominated. Out here at Holsworthy, at Special Forces unit, there's about 400 operators, none of which were openly gay, which we know statistics say otherwise. But it was a lot of those conversations and considerations in my head that let me think that, I didn't want to be different. I never wanted to be assessed on any label other than my competence and capability, my personality, my performance each and every day. and I was sort of very fearful of what it might be seen if I did come out and accept who I was personally. And again, like I said, since then, it's been nothing but, I should have done it a hell of a lot earlier. But again, that was a personal learning journey. Sure. But it's so fascinating for me because I know that you yourself have a very, very similar story, and particularly talking about the incredible mindset that you had from a 17-year-old focusing on your own certainty as opposed to getting caught up with all the competition, and how much of your mental focus and drive that would have taken. But yet still, and as I've learned, there's still at least maybe 1 or 2%, particularly when it comes to that sexuality piece in the back of your head, that was a capability that we never used and never applied to ourselves fully and wholeheartedly. And I'm intrigued to hear about your own sort of mental journey with these things.
Sure, yeah. I think everyone, kind of comes out when they're ready.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that I heard after I came out. It's probably the only thing that may have convinced me to come out earlier. And it was that you don't come out for yourself. You actually come out for the person that's going through an even more difficult time than what you are. More difficult circumstances than what yours are.
Yeah.
And to be the example for that person.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's really good. If someone had kind of explained that to me, but no one knew. Yeah. I also was asked about my sexuality when I was a minor, when I was 16, by a journalist.
Yeah.
And so then after that, I was being accused of being gay. So for me, I would always make the association.
As if it was a weakness or something?
No. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah, that's it.
Or that it's a bad thing.
Yep.
It's all of that, because the tone is different, and it's an accusatory thing that you feel as though, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. It makes you feel wrong. Yeah.
And rather than looking at the positive side of it as well. So it was quite unbalanced in how I would have come out. It kind of, I wish I was out earlier now that I'm out, but it took me a very long time to kind of be comfortable enough to get there.
Yeah.
And I can remember when I came out, so I decided, and I get asked about this, so I give people a little bit of advice, but I can't speak to everyone. But I tell people, like, the order of who you come out to, it's not a hierarchy. So that's good. Actually have some friends that are going to be on your side. Tell them first. Yeah. It doesn't have to be your parents, especially for young people.
Yeah.
But I told I told one of my friends, I told her, and she was just disappointed that I hadn't come out earlier.
Yeah. And
she said, "You're so much more interesting now." Then I went around to one of my mates who's a PT. So, pretty standard, typical Aussie guy. Yeah. I said, "Oh, how you going?" And he's like, "Oh, been the toughest day, mate. I'm fucked." I said, "Well, speaking of fucked, I'm gay." And he's like, "Awesome." Yeah, cool. And he was happy about it. Yeah. He was glad that I got to that point where, I could tell him. Yeah. It was all in the same day. Then I went and told my sister, and she said to me, "Whatever you do, don't tell mum and dad separately." Oh, God. I was like, because I was going to go to mum first, and then she was going to soften it so I didn't have to tell my dad. Yeah. And, I came out to my parents, and, they were fantastic. They said exactly what I needed to hear, which is we love you no matter what.
That's it.
And, I stewed it over as being such a bigger deal than what it was.
100%.
But then, I kind of, I had to kind of come out. I decided I'd come out publicly then as well. And I was about to do an interview, and so I told some people close to me that I'm just going to come out once and do it on TV, basically. Yeah. So I don't have to tell everyone along the way.
That's good.
And I was told at the time, and they're like, "Don't you think you should try and get used to it first?" And I'm like, I'm now 30, and
I just happened overnight.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, that was my line in the sand. I'd come out of the closet, and I was like, I'm not going to take a step back from here. I'll just take steps forward.
Wow, good on you. That's a huge element of courage. I mean, That's moral courage. I personally struggled with moral courage. I remember 2014, a guy who was actually at my unit came up to me and he was going to apply for selection. He's one of the support staff. Shout out to Nick. And he asked me that if I thought it would be an issue if he didn't like girls. And this is just a one-on-one conversation in my office. And I know he looked up to me. I was senior and ranked him. I was sort of like the big brother, the uncle perspective. And for the first time, I freaked out. I became fearful. Yeah. You know, at this time, I'd already done 3 deployments to Afghanistan, and I was scared in that moment, and I let him down. I was like, no, mate, don't worry. They won't worry about any of that stuff. Whereas this guy was looking for someone to connect with him and make it feel all right. And it's so fascinating what you were saying. That is now like the responsibility of anyone who has dealt with that mind space where you feel different. You literally feel that there is something wrong with yourself, regardless of what anyone else says. You feel there's something wrong with yourself, and to potentially have an impact on someone's life to make them not feel that way. Because that's, as far as like health and wellness goes, if you can help someone in that way, that's absolutely huge. But I also have this like thing is like, why do I even need to come out? Like, I'm me. You're very different. You're in the spotlight. It's always a question for you. It would have been so much easier to get it out of it. But particularly since then, a lot of water has gone under the bridge in our own culture, in our own society, and it's just such a normal part of life these days.
I think it is. Well, it is. Now. It is now. It's changed significantly.
Huge,
I know support for marriage equality in 2004 was just under 35%.
Yeah.
So about a third of people support it, and it had doubled by the time that marriage equality came around. So it's changed very quickly. And when you look at a younger generation, I think there will be very little kind of coming out will not be a thing. It will kind of just be I'm into girls, or I'm into guys.
Absolutely.
Or I'm not sure.
That's it. And I think the pendulum always swings, and particularly at the moment, a big observation I make within all our society is that a lot of people really like to be defined by or define others by labels, particularly labels like sexuality that you can't actually control yourself.
Yeah, so I've always been the opposite. I actually hate being labelled.
100%.
So I don't like being put in a box. I don't like being told I'm this or that. I used to get told I was a metrosexual.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like,
that means you're stylish. That just means you're stylish.
No, well, yeah, but it's just a marketing term. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like, why?
And this is what I found. Other people try and exert some form of label in order to provide them with more certainty of what they think you are, as opposed to, hey, he's him, he's happy, unless it impacts on my happiness. Like, why is it a factor? Why do I need to put him into a box?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm really fascinated, particularly in the gay community. I see a lot of people wearing it as a label of entitlements these days, and in everything, you know, people who, unless you've earned something, you know, something you're born with, I don't feel it's something we can wear with entitlement, as opposed to wanting to be treated with equal standards and be given a fair go. That's my sort of take on the conversation.
Yeah, I'm for equality. So
absolutely. Cool.
Head start.
All right. Well, Thorpe, there's been so much we have covered today, but I just want to hit on a few key highlights. First and foremost, it's been so insightful hearing your mindset and your mental just fortitude from that early age. You know, even that new perception of what swimming actually meant to you, and the incredible personal experience and learning lessons in life, your own emotions, your own mental health that you're at this stage. And what is your relationship like with your own mental health at the moment, your mental wellness?
It's pretty good, and it's something that, you know, I manage now. Yeah. I have a couple of days a year where I struggle a bit, but that's it. And I put them into context that, you know, I'm just having a bad day. That's it. And I allow myself to give myself a pass on those days. Okay. But generally it's good, and I can tell when I'm actually kind of starting to slip away a little bit as well. When I'm, you know, would normally go into, you know, a deep depression, I can actually counter that now. And what are those proactive measures that you sort of put in place or have others to help you identify? So it's, you know, it's spending time with friends. So there's a social element to it. You know, it's exercising more, doing things that I enjoy, even making sure, you know, the Netflix kind of continue watching. Yeah. I actually make that my own mental health check. Okay. Have I done the things today that I intended to when I got up this morning? Okay. And if I haven't, I go and do some to get away from that. Because it's an easy trap to fall into, just keep on going. Yeah, got you.
And as you said, it's an ongoing journey. Like it's not a physical injury. You can sort of see the wound healing or maybe feel the range of movement return. But
Sure.
And I know myself, I find the healing comes when I'm probably not as emotive when I'm reacting to something, or someone sowing one of those potentially negative seeds doesn't hit me as much, but they still hit their spot. But it's just a very slow progression. I think that's a key message I want to draw out that you've really highlighted, is that it doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen.
It will happen. It's a hair care commercial, isn't it?
I can't remember what that was. Yeah.
It was Pantene.
Oh gosh, shout out to Pantene. All right, we'll look to finish up, and I just really like to close, particularly with someone of such an incredible person, profession, performance, and just personality that is yourself, the Torpedo himself. Noting that the majority of our audience is the veteran community. If there's anything you'd like to sort of say to those listening, again, in the context of everything that's going on at the moment, my message to veterans is to really try and take control of what they can, and don't forget who they were in service and apply that to everything they are outside of service. But I'd love to hand over to you to see what you'd like to say.
Yeah, I'd also like to tell people how much we appreciate their service as well. And it's a conversation that in Australia, we actually don't know how to say it. And there's a lot of people that have never experienced what you've been through. And we do appreciate it. But, I kind of think, we look at RSL clubs and things like that. We don't know how to engage in this conversation with other people. And I think that's a conversation that this country needs to have in our own identity and in, what has shaped this country.
Yeah.
There's been two major things, and one of those things has come from war.
Yep.
And then the other probably significant one is sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a lot easier for us to talk about sport than what it is the horrors of what people have been through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it as a nation. I myself, being a veteran, sport is such a huge place for me. Like I said, I was a 15-year-old watching the Sydney Olympics, and it's that part where you get to see a country unite behind something, and not unite behind an ideal, but unite behind performance and actions. There's no words, there's no clocks. Like when you're in the pool, you're there doing your performance and you're representing our country. And that's what I really, really enjoyed during my time in service. And I'm with you, there's incredible opportunity for us to have more of these conversations. And you're right, as Australians, we're terrible at giving people compliments. But I want to thank you for everything that you've done for our country, and I really do personally mean that. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what is next for you, what's going on in your life, what's your next purpose from here?
It's a great question. I never know the answer to this. And I'm actually happy not knowing.
Yeah, good.
It's kind of...
Because he's happy.
Yeah, it's more I know where I want to end up. Yeah. And I've learned enough that I don't know how I'm going to get there.
Okay.
But I work at it every day.
Where do you want to end up?
I'm not telling you yet.
Oh, stay tuned. That's going to be episode 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers, mate.
Thorpe, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Been a pleasure.
See you.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of a Veteran podcast. We really hope that there were some key takeaways that might help you, be they relatable, be they aspirational. But we're not just here for your entertainment, so please make sure you remember, move on, and action from here.
And that's it, guys. If you've heard something here today that has truly helped you, it's our duty to share that information with as many as we can. Support is about being proactive, and that's taking action to better our own lives as well as the lives as many mates as we can.
We love your support getting these messages out, so please subscribe. Go to our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Voice of a Veteran. Catch you next time.
See ya.